Welcome back to Educate Afresh, and today we want to handle a very important concept in advanced level biology, and that is the assessment objectives. How are we preparing our students to go for exams? And if you are preparing for paper 1, this should be the right video for you to watch. Today we are going to be talking about assessment objective 1, which is cell biology, respiration, and molecular analysis. We are going to be looking at how can you prepare for exams. So you can say this is a workshop about exam readiness. How do you read scenarios? How do you interpret scenarios? How do you decode command words? And after decoding those command words, how can you write answers that are at the level of analysis and not just explaining, not just describing, but analysis? Now, when we talk about assessment objective 1, there are 3 topics that are involved, but we are going to be talking about that later. Now, it's important to understand that when you are talking about understanding assessment objective 1, there are 4 levels of thinking that are involved. Every assessment objective is going to test for all the 4 layers, even when this question will be 1 or what we call tasks. The first level of thinking is knowing. There are things that you're expected to know. For example, structures like cells, tissues, organs. So you're expected to know at the level of the cell and the tissue. Most of the questions in assessment objective 1 will not climb to the level of organs. They are going to, most cases, going to stop at around the level of cells or tissues. So those are the 2 topics, cellular structure and histology. Now, on top of that, we are also going to talk about the molecules that make life, what we call the chemicals of life. We shall talk about how ATP is manufactured. You are expected to know the process of ATP manufacturing or ATP production. That is glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. And then you are expected to know the process of cell division, mitosis and meiosis, and where the errors can occur in the process of cell division. So for example, what are some of the things that can happen that can cause cancer? Yes. And then, of course, under genetics, you're also going to talk about protein synthesis. The next thing is you are expected to have a certain skill, and that is a skill for data analysis. Data analysis is going to be given to you in 3 formats. Data can be described in words, data can be given as tables, data can be given as graphs. Your responsibility is to detect cause and effect when it is provided for in this data. You are supposed to know that the changes in this data are being caused by this. The changes in this data are the biological processes that we are looking at. According to this data, these are the biological processes that we are looking at. Are we looking at mitosis? Are we looking at protein synthesis? Are we looking at ATP production? Are we looking at meiosis? What type of data are we looking at? From the data you are given, you must be able to identify the different processes that are happening. What is causing the defects? What is causing the failures of those processes? Why is the process not happening as it should? Now, you are supposed to be a high order reasoning person. That means you must look at data and evaluate it. You must look at clues given in scenarios and come up with explanations to biological processes. You must look at the information provided to you and ask yourself, why is this happening? What is causing it? And how is it happening? And then, when all is said and done, you must apply that information to real life scenarios. Either health challenges, for example, it can be a genetic disorder, it can be cancer, it can be a mutation, it can be something that is affecting cells that you propose a management solution, or it can be something that is affecting the environment, or sometimes it can even be ethical. There are things that we are going to come across that we need to talk about the ethics of it, like genetic recombinant DNA technology. You should be able to ask yourself, is this ethical? Is this the right thing to do? Now, I said earlier that there are 3 topics that are involved in assessment objective 1. And what are these 3 topics that are going to be involved in each scenario? The first topic is cell biology. Cell biology is going to require you to tell us the outer structure of the cell. That means the organelles. Now, in O level, we looked at the structure of the cell, which is viewed under a light microscope. But in advanced level, I believe if you are here, you have studied the cell either observed by the TEM microscope or by the SEM microscope. So that type of structure of the cell is what we are talking about. The organelles, the different structures of organelles in cells. And to take it a notch further, we are going to talk about tissue types. That is histology, where we shall talk about the epithelial tissue, the stratified, the columnar. We shall talk about the different type of tissues, like the connective tissue, the muscle tissue, and so on and so forth. And in all these things, I want you to know that we are going to talk about these cells or these tissues when they are normal and when they are defective. So, for example, how does muscle tissue look like when it is normal, and how does it look like in a person, for example, who is having muscle cramps? What could cause muscle cramps? What could cause a person to faint if we are talking about cardiac muscle? What could cause a person to faint if we are talking about maybe brain cells, the neurons, the nervous tissue? And you connect that information to respiration, connect that information probably to a genetic disorder, and so on and so forth. That's what we are talking about here. The second topic is respiration. We are going to talk about the mitochondrial structure, the stages of respiration, ATP yield, respiratory poisons, and so on and so forth. And then the third topic is inheritance and evolution. Under inheritance and evolution, we know that that's a very big topic. And because it's a big topic, it's going to show up in 2 assessment objectives, assessment objective 1 and assessment objective 4. Now, in this video, we are only talking about assessment objective 1. So here, in inheritance and evolution, we shall talk about nucleic acids, DNA replication, protein synthesis, mitosis, meiosis, mutations, and cancer. I want you to pay keen attention to those processes. Nucleic DNA replication, protein synthesis, mitosis, and meiosis. Those 4 processes normally proceed without a hitch. They have no problem occurring. They happen at the back of arm. You don't even think about it. But on the few occasions where they are defective, they have adverse effects. And these are the effects that we are going to be expecting you to explain to us. What happens if, for example, the process of protein synthesis has a problem? Maybe if we have a wrong amino acid placed in a wrong place, in the case of a mutation. What happens if during mitosis a defective cell passes the checkpoints that are put in the cell cycle? What happens if during meiosis we have non-disjunction? So you can see, if you really know your biology, you can see that at protein synthesis I talked about a defection like sickle cell anemia. In mitosis I talked about cancerous cells, and in meiosis a defect can be maybe Down syndrome. And some of these things we expect you to be able to explain them based on the data that is provided to you. Now, every scenario is deliberately going to connect these 3 topics to a certain degree. One topic may dominate the other two topics may be more prominent, and one may be silent, but all the 3 topics will be reflected in every scenario. A question may ask you, for example, to link a mutated gene to a failed enzyme that probably collapses ATP production. Like, a very good example is sickle cell anemia. When we have sickle cell anemia, now we don't have oxygen, now aerobic respiration cannot happen, now the individual cannot have muscle contraction because cellular respiration is not happening. So that is something that you need to really put in mind. Now, there are some skills that you're expected to have. The first skill is knowledge and understanding. You must, bare minimum, recall different structures and the processes that are happening. For example, if we are talking about respiration, you must know where respiration happens, which is in the mitochondria. But to take that a notch higher, you must know where the different stages of respiration happen. For example, you must know that glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm. Without oxygen, the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain cannot proceed. But in the presence of oxygen, we know that whatever is produced by glycolysis, acetyl-CoA, is going to be pushed into the matrix of the mitochondria, where the Krebs cycle happens. But closely connected to that is the electron transport chain in the inner mitochondrial membrane of the on the cristae of the mitochondria. You must know where everything happens. For example, you must know what is the function of the myofibrils in the muscle tissue. What is the function of the hairs on the columnar epithelium? Everything. You must know where these processes happen, where the structures happen, and at that level. Number two, you must be able to apply this information. So if it is a concept data that is given, you must be able to explain to us how this data is going to be relatable. Okay, how this data the data given to you accounts for the explanations that you are giving. You must never make a claim of an explanation without necessarily telling us where this claim brings out the explanation of the science that you are talking about. And finally, you must be able to analyze the data that is given to you. You interpret it and explain to us cause and effect. Yes, you must compare the data before, when it is normal, and the data after. How many crystals do we have in the normal cell? How many crystals do we have in the affected cell? How many cells are produced by cancerous cells? How many times does the normal cell divide? And so on and so forth. And finally, you are going to be required to do two things: synthesis and evaluation, and scientific reasoning. Under synthesis and evaluation, you are going to be requested to propose strategies using evidences. For example, for people who have cancer, can you propose management strategies? For people who have been exposed to carbon monoxide poisoning, can you suggest strategies? Now, in most cases, in the scenario, they will give you a certain strategy, and your job will be to weigh that strategy and justify whether it is the right strategy. And if it is not, now of course when we say justify, you will tell us the pros and the cons of that particular strategy. What are its advantages and what are its disadvantages? And then you will also tell us how we can proceed. Should we use it or should we abandon it? And then you tell us a better option. And then under scientific reasoning, you are going to use the data to justify what you've just said. Everything that you're going to say, scientific reasoning demands that everything that you say must be backed up with evidence. And in most cases, this evidence is going to come from the data that is given to you. So every time you're writing an answer, ask yourself, am I applying the data that has been given to me? The numbers that I saw in the scenario, have I found their relevance anywhere in my answer? And if not, that implies that you are in big trouble. Okay? Now, how do we read a scenario? Every scenario is going to have the same setup, the same skeleton. It's going to have what we call the context, the introduction, a real life or an experimental situation with clues that are hidden in it. For example, we are going to have a laboratory experiment, a research procedure, or we are going to have observations made. We are going to see an example that is given to us. We are going to have information that is given to us about particular scenarios, about particular experiences of people, about findings that researchers have. And inside these findings, we are going to hide clues. We are going to hide information that is relevant in your explanation of context, in explanation of facts, in your explanation of processes. For example, we might tell you that the cells of people who have cancer multiplied this number of times. Now, the context is we are studying people who have cancer, and we are talking about their cells and how they divide. The hidden fact is that we shall show you that their cells multiply much more times than people who are normal. Now, that there is a hidden clue. When you are reading a scenario, ask yourself, what are the things that I'm supposed to see in this particular context that has been given to me? So when you're reading a scenario, my advice is read it first for the story, but then also to find out the biological terms, the numbers or the conditions that are not normal that are happening in that particular scenario. The second thing that you're going to be given is data. Data is going to come in three formats. It can be in the form of a word or a sentence. It can be given as a table, or it can be plotted for you, or a field observation. So we went to the field and we observed a few things. We observed that people who, for example, stay in the coal mines where there is no oxygen are naturally very thin people. Or we see that people who stay in mountainous regions have this type of characteristic with their cells or their tissues. And then people who stay in very hot places have this characteristic. Now, that information is going to form the foundation of your whole essay when you're writing it. Now, you must always identify the baseline, which is the normal, and then also identify the variable, the extreme, what is happening because of the changes in the environment or the condition. Now, every time you write, the data given to you is your evidence. Every claim, every fact that you are stating that is a fact must be backed by this data. Every fact that you state must be backed by this data. And then finally, of course, we are going to have tasks. We are going to have tasks. For example, we are going to have tasks at the level of analysis and evaluation. Now, when I'm starting off students, I like to start them off with explanation. But you have to quickly graduate from that level, because the level that is going to be assessed at advanced level is evaluation and analysis. So there are schools of thought that say start them off with analysis and evaluation immediately, but it will do you no good to start with evaluation when you don't even know how to explain basic concepts. Okay, so in most cases, you are going to be given questions in one big block sentence. You're going to have about 2 or 3 questions. One may ask you to evaluate, one may ask you to analyze, one may ask you to propose a strategy or to justify a strategy. But you must be able to identify the different components of each question. How do we read the question? There are 5 steps to reading a scenario. Number 1, read the context. Okay? Anytime you face a scenario, make sure that you are reading the situation. What is happening? What is the biology that is happening? What are the numbers? What are the unusual conditions? Underline them. So that means you may have to read one or two times. Okay. The second thing is identify the problem. Is something happening that should not be happening? Is something going wrong in this particular scenario? What is changing? Is it a disease? Is it a genetic disorder? Are these cells experiencing stress environmentally? Is there disruption in metabolism? Identify the problem. Number 3, with the data provided, study it. Before you even look at the tasks, study the data, identify the baseline, identify the patterns. Which values are high, which values are low? How are they changing? Identify trends. What is the difference between the groups of data given to me? Which one is normal? Which one is defective? And number 4, decode the command words. What is the command word given to me? Okay, is it analyze? Okay, is it analyze? Is it examine? Is it to account for? Is it telling me to evaluate, to justify? What is required of me? And finally, whenever you're making a claim or whenever you're writing an answer, a task, make sure you come back to the evidence that is given in the scenario. Never give statements that are general. Never give statements that are unanchored. I hope that makes sense, but we are going to look at some examples. Now, the second part to answering a scenario is decoding the command words. Okay? Now, the command words are the things that identify the answer that you're going to write. So we are going to go through a number of command words. Like I said earlier, some of them are going to be more common, some of them are not going to be very common. Okay? The first one is analyze. This is going to be the word. This is the bread and butter. This word here is going to be very important to how you are going to write. When they tell you to analyze, they are saying, break down this information we have given to you. Identify the patterns. Identify the trends. What are the things that are changing in this data given to you? What is causing them? What are the effects of these changes that are given to you? In other words, describe this without first of all linking to a mechanism. First tell us, do you notice the patterns that are happening in this particular scenario? The second one is to examine. This is not going to be a very common one, but it's also similar to what we call analysis. So we are telling you to investigate in depth, consider all the aspects in relation to the scenario. It's much similar to analysis. So here you are going to, for example, tell us this structure is the one that is being affected, and when this structure has this particular relationship with this other structure. So you are examining, you're looking at the data given to me points out the mitochondrial crystals, pointing out the concentration of this in the mitochondria, and so on and so forth. And you're saying, okay, because of this probably is happening. That is called analysis. When they tell you to analyze, they are telling you to break down this information. When they tell you to examine, they are also pretty much telling you the same thing. When they tell you to account for, you are going to give us biological reasons. So a scenario may start with analyze, but in the middle of the scenario, they will tell you and account for. So on top of breaking down the information given to you and identifying patterns, they may also tell you to explain biological reasons that explain a particular data pattern. Okay? So here, you are going to repeat the observation and then explain to us why that observation is happening. Okay? Now, another common word that is going to be asked of you is the word evaluate. When they tell you to evaluate, they are telling you, can you judge the effectiveness of this particular solution? What are the advantages and what are the limitations of this particular situation? Now, of course, you are doing this with evidence. For example, they may tell you, evaluate the effectiveness of a particular strategy. When they tell you to evaluate the effectiveness of a particular strategy, they are saying, can you tell us what could be the advantage of using this strategy and what could be the disadvantages of listing these strategies? Okay? So do not just list points with no judgment. Okay? Just like in analysis, you cannot describe something without a mechanism. You must provide how it is happening. You must provide the why it is happening. In evaluation, you must provide the reasons. You must provide the what and the why. So you tell us, okay, this strategy is effective. That is a what. But explain to us why that strategy is effective. Why is that strategy not effective? If you are saying it should not be good, tell us what is the other alternative. And how is that alternative a better alternative? Another word that is not going to be common, but you will find it in the middle of the questions, is to justify. So when they tell you to evaluate a strategy and probably justify, they will tell you to, on top of telling us why this strategy is effective, justify why it is effective. So justification is a why question. Supporting your claim or your decision using evidence from the scenario. For example, in our example, we are going to see two situations where we have people who are ventilated and people who are not ventilated. But let me not get ahead of myself. If you are really enjoying this, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and at the end of the video, please share this video with your friend. This is Educator Afresh, and their instructor is Solomon. Let's proceed. So, when we're talking about justification, avoid justifying claims without data or principle, or avoid justifying things that have no root with facts. And finally, we are going to talk about assessing. When they tell you to assess, this is also up there in the category of analysis. They are saying look at all the information given to you and make an informed judgment. Look at the data given to you, look at the different data points, the different comparison, and tell us your assessment of the situation. Now, it is very dangerous to make one-sided answers ignoring other factors when you're doing this. So we have done a lot of talking. I know some of you are interested in examples, so let's look at an example. This is an example here. They are saying a Kampala hospital investigates factory workers at a charcoal processing plant. Workers in poorly ventilated areas report headaches, pay attention, fatigue, and poor concentration. So you underline these words here: headaches, fatigue, and poor concentration. Hemoglobin is normal, yet tissues show hypoxia. Meaning, okay, let's first read through to get the story. Lab tests confirm elevated carboxyhemoglobin and sharply reduced mitochondrial ATP output. The team monitors 8 workers, ventilated versus unventilated workstations, across a 4-hour shift, measuring the partial pressures of oxygen, ATP output, and their cognitive performance. And on the side here, they have given you data. The data is oxygen partial pressure percentage. We have carboxyhemoglobin. Yes, carboxyhemoglobin, and then we have ATP, and then we have cognitive scores. We have 2 people. We have the unventilated and we have the ventilated. So the first time you read a scenario, you are going to skim through it. Now you read it again, pointing out the things that you have missed. Okay, so let's read it again. They told us that a Kampala hospital investigates factory workers at a charcoal processing plant. First of all, we have charcoal processing plant, meaning these people probably work in environments where they are burning charcoal, which requires oxygen. So most of them should be in an oxygen deprived environment. But they're telling us they have workers who are in poorly ventilated areas, and there are also workers who are in well ventilated areas. So workers in poorly ventilated areas, people who don't have oxygen, report fatigue. What could cause fatigue? Could it be the lack of enough ATP as a result of not enough aerobic respiration? I don't know. Put that at the back of your mind. Now, if you're writing, my advice is have an answer plan that you're writing on the side for the things that stand out to you when you are reading the scenario. And then they are saying, and poor concentration. Okay, does this mean this lack of oxygen is also affecting their ability to concentrate because of their brain not having enough oxygen? Probably. They're saying hemoglobin is normal. Oh, okay. So these are not sicklers. These individuals are not individuals who have sickle cell anemia. Okay, that's good to know. They're saying, however, their tissues show hypoxia. Now, for those who don't know, hypoxia means deprivation of oxygen to a particular part of the body. Okay, so they're saying lab tests confirm that they have a lot of hemoglobin, carboxyhemoglobin. Oh, so that means that their hemoglobin is being bound to a molecule that is called carbon monoxide. That's very important because we know that carbon monoxide is actually a poison that affects the Krebs cycle. It's not the Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain. And we are going to see how. And then we are saying they don't have enough ATP output. Oh, can this explain why they are feeling fatigue and poor concentration? Probably. They are saying that team monitors 8 workers, those that are ventilated and those that are unventilated. Do you see the baseline? They have the baseline is some people are ventilated and some people are unventilated. So the ventilated people in this case are people who have it normal. So when you look at this data here, we have 67 to 74, which are individuals who are ventilated. That is their oxygen partial pressures. When you look at the numbers of people who are, the people who are unventilated, the oxygen partial pressures are high, but the ventilated oxygen partial pressures are higher. The people who are unventilated, we have 26 to 31, that is carboxyhemoglobin. In other words, how much of their hemoglobin is bound to carbon monoxide is higher than people who are ventilated. And then in ATP, we are going to have more ATP in people who are ventilated and less ATP production in people who are unventilated. Cognitively, cognitive score is going to be better, which is higher, 88 to 91, in people who are ventilated, and people who are unventilated are going to have low cognitive scores. Now, with that in mind, we are going to go to the tasks. Now, I summarize these tasks here because we are in a presentation, but sometimes these tasks may be having more words or they may be combined into one task. So for me, I first gave you the first task: analyze the low ATP output in unventilated workers. Okay. Now, this particular command word is asking you for a number of things. Number one, they are asking you to explain the normal ATP pathway. You are supposed to demonstrate knowledge of the normal ATP pathway. That is glycolysis, the link reaction where we have acetyl-CoA, the Krebs cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation. You must demonstrate knowledge of that. Number two, you are required to explain how carbon monoxide interferes with this process. Where does it interfere with this process? If you don't know, you cannot write a good answer. That's why we said earlier that you must know some of these processes. That is, where does carbon monoxide affect? It competitively inhibits cytochrome oxidase from binding with oxygen. And then you must use the data in the table to support your explanation. So according to me, this is how an answer would look like. Now, of course, this is a skeleton, but it has the things that I think would be very important. Number one, you must explain to us that most ATP comes from the electron transport chain. Okay, so you have to provide us with the data, 32 to 34, the theoretical data. Number two, you must explain to us that carbon monoxide competitively binds with cytochrome C oxidase, which is, I think, the fourth complex that blocks electron transfer to oxygen, which collapses the whole proton gradient. Now, I have a video on this cellular respiration, on how carbon monoxide actually affects this process, so you can go and watch that somewhere there. I'll leave a link to that. And then you must show us how the data demonstrates this. Okay, so you must show us the data that when you look at unventilated workers, these guys have more carboxyhemoglobin and very little ATP production compared to the people who are in a ventilated condition, which show information that is consistent with normal ATP production in the electron transport chain. And then you tell us that the individuals who are in the unventilated have information that is consistent with people who have their electron transport chain inhibited. Because for those that have watched that video, I explained that the blocking of carbon monoxide has a cascade effect. When it blocks complex 4, it blocks the other 1, 2, 3 complexes, meaning we are not going to have hydrogen ions pumped into the intermembranous space, and therefore there is not going to be manufacturing of ATP by ATP synthase, and so on and so forth. It keeps on cascading back. Now NADH is not being offloaded, which means no more NAD is going to be available, which collapses the Krebs cycle, and it keeps going until we don't have any ATP being produced apart from that which is being produced at the level of glycolysis, which is a net of 2 ATP and resulting into anaerobic respiration and accumulation of lactate acid. It's really a dangerous situation. Go and watch that video. Now, the second question is to evaluate the carboxyhemoglobin versus cognitive score. Now, I could have combined that question with the first question and made it one broad question. And that is what you're going to see in most cases. I want you not to be scared that is when they ask you, say, this is a very big sentence. No, don't worry about this sentence. Break it down into manageable portions that you will be able to understand. So let's speed through this. The question asks you to, first of all, identify the trend between carboxyhemoglobin and the cognitive score. When you look at that data in the table, is there a correlation between carboxyhemoglobin and the cognitive score between the ventilated and the unventilated people? You must explain to us why brain cells demand a lot of ATP. Why? Because cognitive score is up there with the brain ATP requirements. And then you must link how the cell structure, or what we call mitochondrial density, in the neurons is going to function. So my model answer in this case would be something like this. Now, a model answer does not necessarily have to be the absolute, because this is biology. You could have approached this differently, but as a teacher, this is how I would love my students to approach this. We have the inverse relationship. You show us that as carboxyhemoglobin rises, cognitive score falls with the information provided in the table. And then you show us the side of the ventilated workers. Always bring both sides to that table, because when you are doing evaluation, you are looking at the data and you are making sense of this data across the board. Then tell us that in the brain we need that ATP for the sodium potassium pump to keep pumping, and the ATPase pumps to keep pumping, so that we have neurotransmitters working, vesicle transport, and all the other things that demand energy in the brain. Remember, the brain is a high neuron density center. We have very many neurons that are firing all the time. Okay, so bring that to light, explain that to us. Then explain to us that neurons carry dense mitochondria. Okay, and oh, I skipped that, sorry about that. Let's proceed. I'll take you back towards the end. The third question is to evaluate ventilation as a protective strategy and propose a biological strategy. Now, notice how they have already given you a kind of strategy to solve this problem when it comes. Your job is to tell us if this strategy is effective and to prove that it's effective. Now, you cannot just claim that it works. You must provide evidence. Okay, so you are to explain the biological mechanism of protection and to justify another sound strategy if there is one. Okay, so you're going to, of course, go back to the data. You're going to tell us that ventilated workers have this type of data, very low carboxyhemoglobin. They produce a lot of ATP compared to the unventilated workers. You're going to tell us that when people because you're going to tell us the mechanism of why this strategy works. When we have proper ventilation, carbon monoxide reduces, which reduces competitive inhibition and carboxyhemoglobin formation, which frees up hemoglobin to carry oxygen, restoring the electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation. You're providing that information to us as a mechanism, as a why. Remember, we have what is happening, what is the strategy, and is it effective? Then you're telling us why that strategy is effective, and then you provide to us an additional strategy. For example, for people who have been in these unventilated conditions for very long, we could put them through what we call hyperbaric oxygen therapy, where we provide them with high concentrations of oxygen, which increases how much oxygen is in their blood, accelerates hemoglobin, carboxyhemoglobin dissociation, which reverses the effects of carbon monoxide. So that is an alternative strategy to just providing ventilation. So you provide us with the first one and the other one. Now, whenever you write a scenario, I have come up with a very simple assessment checklist that can be very important to you. I'm going to go through it in no particular order, but first of all, you must check if you've identified the clues that were given to you in the scenario. Did you match your thinking level to the command word used? Were you just explaining when the scenario requires analysis? Did you do evaluation? Did you do analysis really? Did you justify? Did you propose the right strategy? So your thinking must be matched to the level of the command word given to you. Did you use the data given to you? Did you understand it? Okay. Did you connect the concepts across the different topics? For example, did you connect respiration to biomolecules, which is in this case can be ATP? Did you connect protein synthesis, if it was there in the scenario, did you connect it? Have you connected the different topics, or your answers are heavily on one topic? Okay, did you use the data values from the table to support your explanations? If not, what is the basis of your answer? What is the evidence that your answer is not just from your head alone? Is your strategy biologically justified? Is it practical? Is it something that is founded on true biology? Okay, and the vocabulary you used, is it the correct, precise vocabulary of biology that you used? Okay, so those are there are things that you can actually keep checking in your work and see if your work is precisely correct. Did you explain the cause and effect rather than just describing something that is happening? What is causing it? What is the effect of that particular thing that is happening? Did you explain that? And then, are your statements clear? Are they not just vague? Okay, so things like it helps, it enables this. You write statements that are clear and precise. And then, did you put the facts in the right place where they are supposed to be? Okay, now this structure works for every assessment objective 1 scenario that you're going to meet. Now, I don't claim to be the sole arbiter of knowledge. However, one thing that I can assure you is, if you read the context, you identify the clues in every scenario, you identify the data patterns, you understand what is the exact command word, and then you give answers that are evidence-based, you cannot go wrong. I have been Solomon for Educate Afresh. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and click the link to go for the next assessment objective 2 video. And once again, I remind you to stay curious and to stay reading. Have a good one.